Hi, Aga. Really excited to be talking to you today around performance and culture because there is a big link in your and my opinion between having a revenue strategy and a high performance culture. So, Aga, maybe briefly introduce yourself.
Cedric, thank you for having me here. It's such a joy to be here in conversation with you. So, my name is Aga Bajer. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Culture Brained. And our mission is to make work synonymous with fun, meaning, and belonging. And the reason behind this is I discovered in my primary research that these three pillars enable people to do their best work. And so we believe in strengthening these pillars in organizations to help them achieve optimum performance, but also drive employee wellness, because obviously these two are very connected, and we can talk more about this later.
Yeah, great. And especially they are connected. In my experience, some people still think like culture is maybe a bit fluffy, and then we have the hard data of revenue
Yeah.
and having a strategy around that revenue, but they're very closely linked with each other. So you spoke about the three pillars. What are those three pillars?
So the pillars are fun, meaning, and belonging. This is what emerged from the data as we started analyzing it. I've spoken to, over the past 10 years, to more than 3,000 people. And when we looked at the data, what we discovered was there were some trends. And I will start with belonging because, we all know Maslow, right? Maslow had this pyramid and he placed belonging somewhere in the middle of the pyramid. And what many people don't know is that Maslow did not carry out any scientific research into it. He just had a hunch and
Mhm.
followed it and created a framework, and now we take it as gospel. But actually, modern research shows us that belonging is the fundamental human need. Our brains are wired to belong. And when we don't have a sense of belonging at work, surprise, surprise, we are not able to have the best possible performance. And as an organization, we are certainly not unlocking our people's potential. It's a little bit like expecting our employees to hit all the numbers, and bring the revenue that we want them to bring, whilst they are missing food and shelter.
Yeah.
Because this is, Maslow said food and shelter are basic human needs, and I think no one would argue with that. But we do expect very often people in organizations to accomplish incredible things without having their basic human need met, because it's not food, it's not shelter, it's actually belonging.
Yeah.
So belonging is one really important pillar. The second pillar is meaning. We are, as human beings, really craving a sense that what we do matters and makes an impact. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, saving the world or saving the planet. We simply want to know that the things that we are producing or the things that we are doing have an impact on someone. And it can be a colleague in the office. It doesn't really matter that much to a lot of people, I found out. But what matters is that people would miss me if I were gone, because my contributions are significant enough for someone to notice when I'm not there.
Mhm.
And finally, and the third pillar is something that I get a lot of resistance from a lot of people: fun at work. Now, when I talk about fun at work, I talk about something that I now refer to as deep fun, as opposed to shallow fun. So shallow fun is like, scrolling Facebook or binge watching Netflix, or even
Mhm.
those Friday pizza parties in the office. But deep fun is the joy of work itself.
Mhm.
And if anyone has ever had fun, and enjoyed work itself, you will know, you will resonate with that, and you'll realize that it's really absolutely necessary for us to be able to do our best work.
Yeah, and then you also probably when you talk about the deep fun, then you probably also in the deep work in the zone,
Yeah,
you lose
absolutely.
lots of
Because
time.
yeah, and one of the things that stands in the way of our ability to have fun at work is actually the fact that we now live in the era of time confetti. So, we have these back-to-back meetings, and often they are like 20 minutes, and then we log out and log into another one. And obviously, there is no space to breathe, and there is
Mhm.
really no space for us to get into what Csikszentmihalyi referred to as a state of flow, where we can really go deeper into our work, do some creative thinking, and again, experience that sense of fulfillment.
Yeah.
Simply because we are performing an activity that is just enjoyable in itself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love what you said, and it really resonates with me, especially when you look at, well, especially all three, but when you look at belonging, these days it becomes clear, right, from a sales point of view, it's
Mhm.
absolutely useless to try to make a sale on your own. So selling and marketing really becomes teamwork. So collaboration is
Yeah.
crucial, but then the right type of collaboration as well. Do you see companies that are really making sure that people and belong and do then that collaboration? Or what do you see on the market?
I do see organizations that are very intentional about this because they know the science and they know the business case behind this, but also they are genuinely committed to creating a healthy environment for their employees as well. So, to be honest, the organizations that do most work in that space are organizations that don't do it just for profit. They also do it because there is a conviction that it's the right thing to do. And again, not surprisingly, what we see is these organizations, and this is not my research, this is research that is available out there done by many scientists. We see that those organizations actually have up to 45% higher
Yeah,
profits.
yeah,
So investing in our people is something important. Certainly investing in teamwork and strong bonds within teams, especially sales teams. This is really interesting because as you say, we have this, I think there is this myth of the lone ranger, like the lone wolf or a
yeah.
maverick, right? That brings in the sales and hits all the targets. And somehow we have this person on the pedestal. But actually, again, when you get into the data, when you look at what's happening in very successful organizations, you realize that sales is a team effort.
Yeah.
And whilst, you might have one-to-ones with your clients, obviously, and there's one person in interaction with a client, what's behind is really a team effort. And it's very important to drive it and
Mm.
create an architecture around it as well. And one of the things that we don't think when we think about culture is that things like how do we reward our teams? How is our bonus structure? What does it look like? How is it structured? It actually is going to have an impact on the level of teamwork that's happening in our teams. One of the things that we see, of course, are individual performance bonuses. And
Mhm.
you really have to ask yourself, is this really serving our need for more teamwork in this organization? And a lot of organizations are realizing now, actually, no, it's not. And if we want to foster more connections, more collaboration, then we need to think differently about how we reward our people.
Yeah, this is really coming up, right? I mean, I'm already a while in sales where you had those lone wolves. They came in a couple of times for a coffee to talk to
Mm.
pre-sales to engineers, and then they went back having their coffees with their mysterious clients. And this has completely changed, and you do see exactly right. So if you look on the sales organizations or sales development reps, are they commissioned based on the number of meetings? Are they commissioned on the revenue? But then we
Mhm.
have customer success that is more and more involved into retention, obviously. But we have the pre-sales, we have marketing. So it is really evolving. And before we go deeper into the revenue side of this, if you look at belonging, we also talk about being able to be yourself or at least express yourself.
Mm.
But it's also a balance, right? Because if you want to be yourself by playing games all day and not showing up at work, and right, you don't foster collaboration. And so,
Right.
what is then there the right balance to be and high performance and to contribute and being yourself?
Yeah. This is the key word here, Cedric, balance, right? And I truly believe that we really need to learn how to toe the line between, bringing our whole selves to work. This is a very popular
Mhm.
phrase recently. And frankly, I have some beef with this phrase and happy to talk about why. So bringing our whole selves to work versus showing up at work in a way that enables collaboration with others as well. And what I have seen, to be honest, is that, actually bringing our whole selves to work might sound nice, but actually it doesn't work for the individual very often, and it doesn't work for the organization simply because not all parts of ourselves are appropriate at work. And I think, a more useful thing to think about is how can we create an environment for our people to be authentic? So, and it's a nuance perhaps, but it's a very important nuance, right? So you don't need to be your whole self, and you don't need to bring all the stuff that you do in your private life to work. But it's certainly important that you can be authentic. You can bring your personal values into it. You can give your work and your approach your personal personality stamp. And that's not an easy thing to accomplish for organizations to create that sort of environment. And another nuance that I would introduce to that, and again, sometimes, in some environments, is not very popular, is thinking how can we help people to bring their best selves to work? And authentic best selves, right? Because, I have a part of me who's really grumpy in the mornings. Now, I don't think that my colleagues need to see that part of me in the office during our morning meeting, So it would be authentic for me to be grumpy and to complain in the morning. But the question that I really need to be asking myself is does this part belong in this context? And is this really my best self that is appropriate to bring to the situation? And, this is not to say that we are not human beings. And of course, we will have situations where our not so great selves will slip into work, and this should be absolutely expected, right? Because we're only humans. But the effort, I believe, should be around how can I bring more of my best self to work.
And I love that you say context. Context always
Mm.
matters, obviously. And what I also see is, on the one hand, you have people or companies promoting bringing yourself to the organization, and then on the other hand, those same organizations, they expect that everybody sells in the same way. Um, do you have some experience in guiding companies in having that personality through their cells, being a bit more loose
Mhm.
maybe with the processes rather than having everything being chiseled out into stone? Because for me, that's also a danger with a too
Right.
rigid culture or too rigid process.
So, a couple of concepts that I think are really relevant here, and this is what great organizations do. On one hand, you have certain principles. And when it comes to principles, like, for
Mhm.
example, um, connection before content,
Yeah.
this is a really great principle. You want to be able to connect with your client before you start selling them something, connect at a human level. And when it comes to principles, I think alignment and consistency within teams is really important. However, where diversity is really useful is how people implement these principles and how they weave in their personality into these principles. So, all the tactical stuff that people can do around the principles that the organizations has laid out is absolutely, there's plenty of room to color outside of some boundaries and really add your own flavor and your own personality. And I know that and people who are in sales know, people connect with people. And there's one thing about humans and one thing about people. We are all different. So actually, clients do appreciate the fact that someone is authentically themselves. And we resonate both with commonalities that we have with people and with differences. So this in itself is a huge advantage. However, you do want your sales team to be aligned around certain principles. And there are sales principles that we know that work, but there will also be certain principles that are very unique to an organization. Like, for example, its core values, right? How you sell, how you work, it really needs to be aligned with those things. So these sort of principles are also incredibly important. And I think also a source of huge competitive advantage to your organization, to be honest. I work a lot with organizations, helping them decode their core values. And one of the things that I always advise everyone is think of it on two axes. So your values need to be a strategic enabler of your business objectives, right? So they need to help you be successful.
Yeah.
But also they need to be idiosyncratic. In other words, they need to be yours. They need to be unique. They need to make people feel like, oh yeah, this is Apple. Like I can see that this is Apple and this is Starbucks and it's different. You know, there's a different vibe. The problem is that very often organizations have very similar values and therefore, you know, on a client side, it's same, and that doesn't really help sales, to be honest.
Yeah, true. Then you start with commoditization, you don't know the
Mm,
value of things, so it becomes a very difficult way to sell them.
yeah. And it's a
Um,
race to the bottom, you know,
yeah,
it's a race to the bottom, right? And then you really need to compete on price. And we all know how it ends. So it's not a great place to put yourself in.
yeah,
And, you know, one of the things that I like to talk about when I speak to people like your audience is obviously you are putting a product into the market, but actually what you really are putting out there is to a great extent your culture.
mhm,
Because, you know, unless you are selling crude oil or sugar or something that is really a commodity. But even those things, they have a brand. And of
yeah,
course, the brand has a value in itself. You are really selling your culture. So it's really important to be very intentional about it.
yeah. Yeah, for me, actually, strategy is culture, and the other way around is on
Mm.
the how do you achieve your goals and how
Yeah.
do you resonate? How does this resonate on the market? So for me, that's very important. The danger also, and we briefly mentioned it, is that culture can become too rigid, and then your performance will drop. Can you maybe give some pointers on how to avoid that your culture becomes too rigid?
Mm. I think that even before I make some pointers around this, I think it's probably useful to define what culture really
Yeah.
is, right? So, culture is a set of unwritten, informal rules around what makes us succeed here.
Hmm.
So, it's not necessarily what's written, you know, in your culture manifesto, but it's how people behave at work. And these are habitual patterns of interactions between people. So, this is what culture is: habitual patterns of interactions. And when we think about this in this way, of course, it's pretty clear that because they are habitual, they are deeply rooted and quite hard to change.
Yeah.
So, your question is a really important one because indeed, when culture is deeply rooted and it has been there for a while, it's very
Hmm.
easy to fall into that trap of not even noticing that there is a need for change. And people will start saying, you know, but yeah, but we've always done things this way, so let's keep doing it. And you get habituated even to stuff that is dysfunctional. And a lot of organizations had these experiences. Like, you know, Microsoft is a very well publicized example of an organization that was super toxic before Satya Nadella.
Hmm.
But for people inside of the organization, they could no longer realize how toxic it was. And so, what do we do? This is your question. What do we do in those cases? Well, first of all, look at your results. And when you see that there is a gap between where you want to be and where you are today, it's the first indication that your culture is not supporting your business. And this is what exactly you talked about. Culture is strategy, strategy is culture. They're interconnected. So if you struggle to accomplish your business objectives, immediately put your culture under a magnifying glass and ask yourself, what is it about the way we do things around here, the attitudes, the mindsets, the beliefs that we have that is holding us back? And you can do it at the level of a team. And I very often like working with teams in my own organizations as well, where we look at what's happening in the team, because actually your organization is simply a set of microcultures. Every team almost has its own microculture. And of course, then there are some commonalities between teams. So I think the best thing to do is really at a team level to start asking yourself these questions. What's holding us back in the way we're thinking, what we believe, the attitudes that we have, our worldview? And then, what is pulling us down? And then how can we remove this obstacle? What would be the first step? What would be the behaviors that we need to adopt to go against that? And basically what it does, it brings culture from that invisible thing that we stop noticing to acknowledging that this is actually the force that drives everything. And so we want to be intentional about it and we want to talk about it. And when this conversation happens, of course, then you start building the runway or the pathway to create the change that you want to see.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you were talking about the microcultures, I had the reflex of thinking about silos, because when you look at mature companies, you have very often those big silos. And two statements there. Number one, do you think that in such a silos, all leaders will be able to drive that collaboration and to break through those silos? And then secondly, I think that's a very good point, and to talk about the meaning, because maybe the company goals, or when it's a huge company, it can be too abstract. And then the local leader, the first line, second line leaders, they might be the people that drive then that culture. So first of all, when you talk about the leadership in breaking those silos, is it possible that everybody changes? And then secondly, the impact on the first or second line leaders in meaning in building meaning within a culture.
Yeah. So, breaking up silos is quite a tough task, obviously. And, if your question is, will everyone be able to do it or to adapt to collaboration, cross-functional collaboration, for example, the answer is obviously probably not everyone. If your organization is like any other organization, you will have the early adopters, people who have seen the need and felt the frustration of working in silo, and they will be the first ones to reach across boundaries and start collaborating with other departments. And you certainly need to know who they are. Yeah. Because you want allies if you are trying to create a change like that. And the way you find out who is really into it is not by asking people, what do you think? Do you think it's a good idea to collaborate with across functions? Because everyone will say yes. Yeah. People know that this is the politically correct thing to do. And so people will start nodding their heads and saying yes. The way you find out who is the early adopter is when people say, yes, I think it's a good idea, we should do something about this, is to ask for their investment and commitment. And it can be time, it can be budget, it can be their involvement in a specific initiative, right? And when people say, they start nodding, but they also say, yes, I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to be on that team, or I'm willing to devote a part of my budget for this or whatever, then you know that this is an early adopter. So these people, they are going to be your very important allies when you're trying to create this. And of course, they create that initial trend. And if the collaboration that they've forged is effective, then probably the rest of the organization will say, hey, this is really interesting what they've been able to accomplish. I want to be a part of that. Yeah. So this is probably more than half of your organization. And then you have some people who are opposing this, trying to protect their turf, etc., etc. And this is always incredibly hard. And we need to be prepared that there will be individuals, it's simply pure math, that
Yeah.
will resist that sort of change for various reasons. And if we encourage them and involve them and explain the rationale behind this, and there is still a lot of resistance, and you are trying to accomplish such a cultural change, sometimes you really need to to make a difficult decision. And that decision might be that this person actually doesn't fit the sort of culture that we're trying to create. And you might have to say goodbye to them. This
Yeah.
is of course, the last resort.
Yes, of course.
I never say do this, at the first sign of resistance, obviously. But when you've given people time and tools and opportunities to collaborate and they still refuse, this is costing your organization a lot in terms of employee morale, in terms of opportunity cost, in terms of money, et cetera, et cetera. So the cost is simply too large, I think, to ignore.
Yeah, and that's preventing is of course always better than
Yeah.
having this happening. So when you look at companies that are maybe not very big yet with outspoken silos, how can we prevent from the start that we build that high performance culture where there is
Mm.
collaboration, and there are some guidelines and some principles that you spoke about.
So what I've seen happen in startups that evolve and grow and become scale ups, and that there's this high growth journey, is that obviously, initially in a startup there is no silos. It's simply impossible, right? Everyone is doing everything. It's a very tightly knit team. The energy is amazing, and it's all about collaboration.
Mhm.
Now, as your business grows and you start building larger departments, if you try to stick to that, it's a recipe for disaster, because large organizations cannot operate this way. So you need systems, you need processes, you need procedures to keep things moving really fast and moving in the right direction. So replicating what you had at the beginning is not a good idea. What I find great organizations and great scale ups are successful at is saying, right, so what are the things that we have to systematize, and what are the systems, what are the processes, what are the procedures that will really allow us to scale in a consistent and safe way and fast way? And what are the things that we need to still maintain the adaptability around, and
Mhm.
therefore we need a lot of collaboration. And you maintain those links and collaboration around issues that require adaptive performance versus tactical performance. Tactical performance is, like you have a certain process to deal with your pipeline, for example, and it's really well mapped out, and you have all these steps. One step leads to another, and you don't want your people to veer from that, because you know that it will slow things down, things will break down. It's just, again, a recipe for the disaster. So you want people to stick to certain tactical ways of doing stuff. But then there are things that where you need to be adaptive. And so it's almost like you draw a line on a page of paper and ask yourself, what is the tactical stuff that we need to build out systems and procedures for? Because it will allow us to grow our speed and effectiveness. And what is the adaptive stuff, like innovation, for example, or understanding the market? That really requires a lot of collaboration and diversity, and you need to maintain these links. So for me, be intentional, know why you are collaborating, and don't try to create links where they are not necessary, because this is exactly how collaboration fatigue sets in. And especially in large organizations, people say not another forced task, or not another team effort, not another initiative. I just can't, it's too much.
Yeah.
So
Pet projects, so-called pet projects, and people
yeah,
just don't want to do
exactly.
them anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, so balance is key here as well.
Yeah, and then we talk about the people as well, in the sense of if you look at growing companies, we talk about having the right people in the company in between brackets. So you have founders that keep on hiring people themselves until they have like 100, 200 or more employees. How do you look at this in bringing in the right people, and who should do this?
So this is a really good question to be thinking about when your business is growing because, when the team is small, your culture is basically sort of conveyed through daily interactions,
Yeah.
and people absorb it very quickly. However, there are situations indeed where you grow from a team of 100 to a team of 600 or 800 in a year. And so suddenly you end up with 700 people, 600 people who don't know your culture and
Mhm.
bring a lot of baggage with them. And
Yeah.
if you haven't made the right selection, that can completely destroy your business because suddenly you have a majority that is completely misaligned with what you are building in terms of culture. So, how do you find the right people? First of all, in order to be able to know who you are looking for when it comes to culture fit and culture add, you need to know what culture you are optimizing for. And this is something that I see missing from a lot of organizations. They talk about, we hire for culture fit. And when I ask them, can you please describe the culture that you are optimizing for? They can't. And so for me, number one step is define that. Define the kind of culture that is going to help you be successful in the next 2 years, in the next 3 years. What are you building for, culturally speaking? And then ask yourself, so if you want this kind of culture, then what would be a stunning colleague that will help us to build this culture? And we, when we work with organizations, we actually create a culture playbook that gives specific descriptions of all of these things. So we have, for example, a description of a stunning colleague. We have a description of a great leader.
Mhm.
And then you know exactly what is the avatar, what is the persona, not in the sense of demographics, but in the sense of attitudes and mindsets and some overlap when it comes to values as well. Because whilst obviously you don't want to hire mini-me's, you do want people who align with you on certain important principles. And so you need to know, in other words, what those principles are, what those mindsets are, what those attitudes are. And finally, when you know what they are, I think what's really important is learning how to interview and how to create these experiences when you can identify whether people really do have these mindsets or not. And that is an art in itself. There is something called behavioral interviews, and it's basically asking people questions about past experiences. And it's very hard to fake it if you know how to do it. So you ask questions like, tell me about a time in your career when you stood up and spoke up about a topic that you felt was really important for the team, in spite of the fact that it was an unpopular stance.
Mhm. Mhm.
And you have the person talk about this. It's hard to make those things up in the moment, so people can't easily fake it. And this is how you learn whether people bring in those attitudes that you need in your team.
Yeah. Well, yeah. A lot of very valuable information. I was just looking at the time. We are over the 30 minutes. I would like to limit it to 30 minutes. Really went so fast. Do you have maybe a couple of pointers on how to start as a startup or as a scale up in building that high performance company? What would they need to do day one? Say, yes, I want to start. This is what I'm going to do the coming 90 days.
Yeah. So I'll focus on culture because this is my area of focus. I would say if you want a high performance organization, be very intentional about what sort of culture is going to enable you to achieve that success. And what I mean by being very intentional is really creating a very, very clear image of what it looks like. I would suggest that you create a culture playbook where you describe what your core values are,
Mhm.
what a stunning colleague looks like, what a great leader looks like, what is the desired emotional impact that you want to have on your clients and on the people working for you. Because when your organization grows, you really need a guide and a North Star, and people need to have one source of truth when it comes to what sort of culture you are building. And once you have that vision really clear, it's really all about embedding and activating that throughout your entire employee experience and your customer experience. And so it's really all about mapping out that journey and how can you make sure that there are plenty of opportunities for people to show up in the right way. You know, we talked about rewards. How do we need to tweak our reward system so that it gives people an incentive to collaborate rather than compete? Things like that. It's not fluffy stuff. It's, you know, very often about the systems that you build. So you need to make an audit of what systems you have in place right now and what is the architecture that either stands in the way of you building the culture that you want to build or is enabling you, and also design the systems and the support that you will need. And finally, you know, as an organization grows, you need to remember your culture will no longer be centralized. Your culture will be distributed, and people who have disproportionate impact on the culture within the teams are the leaders of those teams. Yeah. So investing in your leaders and really helping them to be the role models of the culture that you want to cultivate and walk that talk every single day from the morning to late at night when they have interactions with their teams is incredibly important. So first select the right leaders, but also then really invest in them so that they can really accomplish that impact that you want to have on those teams. Leaders have up to 75% impact on the culture that a team has. It's a huge chunk of the influence, and so I would invest there first. And of course, you know, if we had more time, I could talk about more things. But if you get those three things right, I think you are already ahead of many organizations out there.
There's so much to do around the culture, and it's we barely scratched the surface, although we covered some very fundamental things. So when people have more questions, where could they reach out to you?
So there are a couple of places. One is LinkedIn. I hang out on LinkedIn quite a lot, so you can find me there and please connect. Aga Bajer. Then you can go to my website, agabajer.com. It's spelled AGABAJER.com. And you'll find also a lot of free resources that we create for our audiences, a podcast, a blog, and we have a great newsletter where we share tips on how to cultivate thriving cultures. There's something also that we do, which is a community for culture leaders where people can come in and benefit from the expertise of world-class experts that I interview on my podcast, but also from my experience in building thriving cultures, and most importantly, from the experience of peers on the same journey. So we have founders, we have HR people there, and they're all really interested in cultivating an environment where the people can do their best work. The community is called the Culture Brain Community, and if you want to check it out, an easy way to find it is to type this into your browser, tinyurl.com/culture brained, ED at the end, one word.
We'll put the links also in the comments.
Thank you, Cedric.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aga. It was extremely interesting, and have all the best of luck with building cultures in high brands.
Thank you, Cedric, and thank you for the work that you are doing. I think it's so incredibly important that organizations at that stage of growth have resources like your podcasts to dip into. So I'm profoundly grateful for you and for your show and for the work that you are doing. And it was a great pleasure to be in conversation with you.
Thanks so much for the kind words. See you.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.